I just appreciate people calling in and sharing their opinions. Agree, disagree. It's great to have you on board, and it's great you're a part of Nothing But Truth, proudly on AFR Talk. Lock it in. Well, we have this man locked in, and we will not waste any of his time. His name is Hans von Spakovsky. He is the manager of the Election Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation, where he is also a senior legal fellow. He's also a good friend of the show, and we've missed talking to him. How are you, Hans?
Crane, I'm doing fine. I hope you're doing well, too.
I am. I got to ask you about Eric Holder, our Attorney General, because he said some comments related to the voter ID laws, and, well, I took kind of a montage, but let's just roll it.
There are some things that I think need to be looked at, though, in connection with this recodification of the Voting Rights Act. Chief among them, I think, is this whole notion of this photo ID requirement. And if we can show that that photo ID efforts are done inappropriately and for improper reasons, I think that ought to be the basis for federal intervention. And so I'm a little concerned that that appears, at least for now, not to be a part of the scheme. People have to understand that we are not opposed to photo identification in a vacuum, but when it is used in certain ways to disenfranchise particular groups of people, whether by racial designation, ethnic origin, or for partisan reasons, that, from my perspective, is problematic. And the reality is that all the studies show that this whole question of ballot integrity, in-person voter fraud, simply does not exist to the extent that would warrant these kinds of measures. We had the commission that the president appointed just yesterday, and they indicated this was not a significant problem. And so I think they've come up with a remedy in search of a problem, and I think it is being used in too many instances to depress the vote of particular groups of people who are not supportive of the party that is advancing these photo ID measures.
Now, Hans, he began by saying that he believes that some are coming from a good faith perspective, but I think many are using it for partisan advantage. And then you've heard the comments. Your thoughts on the Attorney General's comments and characterization of voter ID laws?
Well, almost everything that he said is wrong. I mean, the idea that these are being passed in order to suppress people's votes is wrong. And I don't know what in the world he's talking about when he says the president's commission just said something against voter ID. Voter ID isn't mentioned anywhere in the president's commission's report. This is the advisory commission the president set up after the election. They issued a report last week. I actually I was invited to the White House to listen to the presentation. There's nothing in that report about voter ID, and yet Eric Holder's claiming there is. I mean, that just shows how misinformed he is.
Now, you were at the White House, yes, Hans?
I was. I was very surprised to get the invitation, but I was invited to a meeting where they kind of presented the recommendations from the President's Advisory Commission.
And I know you've worked in administrations before, but my question to you is, when they presented this, was there an opportunity to ask questions?
There was an opportunity to ask questions, and look, many of the recommendations in there are actually pretty good. But like I said, there's not a single word in there about voter ID. They stayed away from that issue because they knew they wouldn't get a bipartisan consensus on it. So the Eric Holder is just wrong about that.
Is the idea of mentioning voter ID because what you've written about and exposed in your book, Who's Counting, as well as many interviews right here on Nothing But Truth, the substance of what they're saying simply does not line up with what is fact? Is it just a political tactic to ascribe to those who support voter ID that there is some kind of racial animus that is behind this, ethnic animus, however you want to put it, characterize?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's true. Certainly it is for Eric Holder. Look, he's a very smart lawyer. He knows those claims that he's making are not true. So the only reason really to make them is to scare the Democratic political base, to scare African American voters, because that helps out his political party, and I'm afraid that's exactly what he's trying to do.
And it continues. Hans, we have the high-profile indictment of Dinesh D'Souza for making campaign contributions, allegedly illegally, in the way that he channeled money to a particular candidate, $500,000 bond. Your thoughts on this indictment, and is this politically motivated, in your opinion?
Well, it's very unfortunate. Dinesh D'Souza, as most people know, made a very interesting movie about Barack Obama that came out prior to the election. But I really don't see anything unusual about this indictment. What he did is clearly illegal. He talked others into making contributions to a candidate for the U.S. Senate and then reimbursed them. That's illegal under federal law, and that is something that the Justice Department regularly prosecutes. Just a couple of years ago, they prosecuted a lawyer out in California named Pierce O'Donnell for doing basically almost exactly the same thing and for almost the same amount. D'Souza did it for about $20,000, and I think O'Donnell amount was something like $26,000 or $27,000. So unfortunate, but there's nothing unusual. The Justice Department has been prosecuting these kind of cases for many years.
And so the behavior and the fine, or the bond, the amount, is consistent with the charge.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm surprised about is that I would have thought Dinesh's lawyers might have tried to work out some kind of plea agreement or deal with the Justice Department, but that apparently has not happened.
Hans, the IRS and the targeting of specific groups. We've just heard a speech by Chuck Schumer last week, and maybe you did not hear it, and I would think, having heard it, it actually would be a good thing not to hear it. That's my opinion, conjecture, or actually, this is my opinion. Bottom line, he talks about using the IRS to handle the Tea Party groups and administrative maneuvers to, in essence, limit their power. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I did see excerpts from the speech, and it was just astonishing how open he was about using the tools of government, which are right now controlled by his party, to go after and stop the Tea Party and other conservative organizations. I mean, he made absolutely no bones about the fact that that's what he wants to have happen. And, that puts what the IRS did in a very interesting perspective.
What do you make of the president's claim, and he's obviously put this out for the people speaking for him? We could play clips. I don't want to limit our time. We've done it before. You're aware of the clips, I'm sure. The statements of using the power of the pen to get things done because Congress won't do their job. Is this a political tactic, considering the funding invested in Congress and the power invested in Congress in Article 1? Or is this threat just consistent with his behavior of his first term?
Well, it's an acceleration of his behavior during the first term. I'm sure you saw that he apparently is going to announce tonight that he's going to raise the minimum wage paid by federal contractors to their employees, even though he's got no statutory or legal authority to be able to do that. In fact, there are numerous federal laws that define how much is supposed to be paid, and the president, he doesn't have the power to tell federal contractors to pay more than what the federal law specifies they have to.
Recognizing that many people are waking up to the oversteps, including the Supreme Court, it looks like. Why, understanding that there's got to be a strategy behind something, and this only actually highlights what many Americans, no hyphens, no parties, see as abuse of power and are fearful of, rightfully.
Yeah, they are, but look, I think this administration is proving that they don't really care what most people think about this. They believe that the end justifies the means. They have the power to do whatever they want, and if it breaks the law or is outside the Constitution, they don't really care. They intend to get as much done as they can to move the U.S. to their ideal of a progressive socialist state, and they're going to do it while they're in power.
What is the recourse for those who oppose the actions because they are extra-constitutional, the oversteps? What specifically, and I would believe in the House, where funding bills start, what specifically can they do, and what should we as voters be looking for them to do, as Americans, not Republicans, Democrats, Independents, as Americans to do?
Well, look, it's very difficult when you only control the House. The House does have the power of the purse, and the way to get back at the president for what he's doing is to try to put cuts into the budget that hit specific departments where he's going outside of the law. But as you know, every time the Republicans have gotten into that kind of a budget fight, they've basically lost in doing that. The only other alternative is to sue, and that's seeing some success. Remember, we're now waiting for the Supreme Court to issue a decision on whether the president acted unconstitutionally when he made recess appointments to several federal government agencies, and that would be quite a severe rebuke to the president.
If there was one message that you would like to hear in the response to the president's State of the Union, what would that one message be?
That we will not stand still while the president acts as basically almost a dictator in going outside of the Constitution and doing things he's not legally authorized to do.
Hans von Spakovsky, my final question to you. If there is a phrase that the president uses or a word, and we have a game, it's called the physical challenge, nothing but truth, State of the Union physical challenge. Every time he says this, you have to do a push-up or a sit-up. What phrase or word do you think would produce the best result of physical workout?
Income inequality.
There it is. Hans, it is a pleasure and privilege. Great talking with you. Thanks for taking time tonight. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Always happy to do it, Crane.
Great. Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Analyst at